All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the work of Dr. Peter Attia and really uncover a pretty revolutionary way to think about health and longevity. Okay, so let's just start with a number that might surprise you. 5x. What? What could that possibly represent? I mean, it's not just some random number, right? This figure, it sits at the very heart of this whole new playbook we're talking about for a longer, better life. Well, here it is. It's the difference in your risk of dying from any cause in any given year if you're in the top 2.5% of cardiovascular fitness compared to someone in the bottom 25%. I mean, that is a 400% difference. Just let that sink in for a second. So, you gotta ask, right? If the number is that staggering, why aren't we all laser focused on this? It really reveals this huge gap in how we think about health. And honestly, it suggests our current playbook might be, well, dangerously outdated. And this is what Dr. Attia calls the slow death problem. His whole argument is that we're basically stuck in this old model of medicine, one that's completely failing to address the diseases that, let's be honest, are going to affect most of us. You see, for the last 100 years or so, what he calls medicine 2.0 has been absolutely incredible at fighting what he calls fast deaths, things like infections and trauma. I mean, it doubled our life expectancy. But, and this is a big but, it's made almost zero progress against the slow deaths. We're talking about heart disease, cancer, dementia, the chronic diseases that are now the main threats we all face. He has this great quote. It's not that the Titanic didn't see the iceberg, it's that it didn't see the iceberg in time. And that's the crucial point, right? Our current approach is totally reactive. We just wait and wait until the disease is right there in our face. But the thing is, the underlying process has been quietly building up for decades. By the time we finally act, it's way too late. Okay, so if the old playbook is so broken, what's the new one? Well, this is what Dr. Attia calls medicine 3.0. So medicine 3.0, it completely flips the script. Instead of waiting around to treat a disease after it shows up, the whole goal is to prevent it from ever taking hold in the first place. You do that by intervening early and by personalizing strategies for every single person. The end game here, it's not just about surviving. It's about making sure your last decade of life is just as vibrant and active as your prime. And a really key shift here is the time frame we're looking at. Think about it. A doctor might tell a 30-year-old, hey, your risk of a heart attack in the next 10 years is basically zero, and they'd be right. But their lifetime risk, that's a totally different story, and it's significant. Medicine 3.0 ignores that short-term view and focuses on the long game, that lifetime trajectory. It understands that the little things we do today, they compound for better or for worse over our entire lives. Okay, so what's really interesting here is when you start to look at which tools in this new playbook have the biggest impact. And I'm telling you, the answer might not be what you think. So to really get this, we need to quickly talk about something called a hazard ratio. Just think of it like betting odds, but for your health. It's a really simple but powerful way to compare the risks between different groups of people. So if a ratio is 1.5, that means there's a 50% higher risk. All right, now check this out. We all know smoking is bad, right? Its hazard ratio for all-cause mortality is 1.5. Type 2 diabetes, about 1.4. But what about just having low strength, being in the bottom quarter for your age and sex? The hazard ratio is 3. That's a 200% increased risk of death. That's literally double the risk of a smoker, just from being weak. And this right here brings us all the way back to that number we started with. The hazard ratio for having low cardiorespiratory fitness, what scientists call VO2 max, compared to having high fitness is a staggering 5. So what does this all mean? It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. The data shows that having high levels of strength and cardiovascular fitness is actually more protective for your longevity than not smoking or not having diabetes is bad for you. I mean, let that sink in. Exercise is, statistically, the most powerful tool we have to extend our lifespan. Period. But here's the thing. Living a long life is kind of pointless if it's not a life worth living, right? And this leads us to what might be the most surprising and maybe the most foundational pillar of medicine 3.0. So Dr. Attia, he breaks down health span, the quality of our life, into 3 main parts. First, your cognitive function, think memory, processing speed. Second, your physical body, your strength, being free from pain. And third, your emotional health, things like joy, purpose, your relationships. And while we tend to obsess over the first two, it's that third one, emotional health, that can actually make or break everything. And he shares this really personal story about a time when, on paper, he was at the peak of his physical health, but inside, he was totally miserable. He realized he'd spent his entire life focused on what he calls resume virtues. His accomplishments, his achievements, but he'd completely ignored his eulogy virtues, things like the quality of his character, his relationships with people he loved. And this was just a massive wake-up call for him. It led him to a pretty profound conclusion. If your emotional health is suffering, well, then none of the other pillars, not the physical, not the cognitive, they don't truly matter. It's the absolute foundation. All right, so how do we put all of this together? Let's move on to the full toolkit and see how this all builds into a complete strategy for your health span. So this new playbook, it uses 5 key tools. We've already talked about the incredible power of exercise and the foundational role of emotional health. But a complete strategy also means optimizing your nutrition, your sleep, and then the targeted use of what he calls molecules, things like drugs, supplements, and hormones. It's the whole package working together. So really, the big takeaway here is this. We have to shift our focus away from just lifespan and onto health span. It's not just about adding years to your life, but adding life to your years. And that means starting today to build a physical and emotional strength you want to have for the rest of your life. So we'll leave you with a question that really reframes this whole conversation. I want you to really think about this. What do you want to be able to do in your last decade of life? What physical things, what relationships do you want to have? What joys do you want to be able to experience? Because the answer to that question, well, that's your motivation to start building your health span right now.